Hey everyone, welcome to Mad Backyard. Today we're going to be smoking a chuck roast on our PIT BOSS Pellet Grill. We're going to be cooking our chuck roast in the style of a beef brisket, and it's a great alternative to a beef brisket when you don't have as much time to spend cooking or as many people to feed as if you were making a full packer brisket. You can think of the chuck roast as a neighbor to the brisket. The brisket comes from the chest of the steer, while the chuck roast comes from the shoulder. So you can think of a chuck roast as actually the beef equivalent of a pork shoulder or pork butt that we make for pulled pork. We're going to show you step by step how we smoke the chuck roast on our PIT BOSS and use a firebox to get more wood smoke flavor. Then we'll show you how we inject our chuck roast with melted beef tallow to give it even more richness and flavor. Look for a chuck roast with a nice red color and a decent amount of fat and marbling. You don't need to buy prime grade beef when it comes to chuck roast, but at least get choice if you can, because you want as much fat as possible so that it doesn't dry out on the smoker. Know that the thicker the chuck roast is, the longer it'll take to cook. Some are thinner and shaped more like giant steaks. These will cook faster than the ones shaped more like a roast, even if they're the same weight. Try to season the night before, because this will give the seasoning plenty of time to work its way into the thick cut of meat. We're going to be using this Holy Cow barbecue rub from Meat Church. It's well known in the barbecue community for tasting great on steaks and brisket, and we like it as well because it contains no sugar. Sugary rubs don't pair as well with beef as they do with pork, so look for something like Holy Cow that has more of a salt, pepper, garlic, and onion flavor profile. I'll put a link to it down in the description if you want to try it for yourself. Give the chuck roast a healthy coating of rub. There's a lot of meat to season here, so you can go pretty heavy with the seasoning on all sides of the roast. Then wrap it in plastic wrap tightly and place it back in the refrigerator overnight. The next day, you want to leave the chuck roast in the refrigerator right until you put it on the PIT BOSS. This is because cold meat is the best at absorbing smoke flavor. Today we're using these Almond Cabernet wine blend pellets from Knotty wood. They've got a really nice aroma that works well with beef, and if you watch our channel, you know we love Knotty wood pellets because of their high density and quality. We made a video showing you how you get more smoke flavor from better quality pellets. I'll put a link to it down in the description if you want to learn more. And as always, make sure to keep your leftover pellets in a good airtight storage container like this one from Oklahoma Joe's. Turn on the pellet grill, let it run through the startup cycle, and set it to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Install the top rack in your PIT BOSS and place a large water pan down on the bottom grates. This will add moisture to the cooking chamber and help buffer the heat from below to better cook our chuck roast evenly and indirectly. For more smoke flavor, we're going to be setting up our Cameron's Flip Pro smoke box with some cherry wood chunks as well. Make sure to check out our video on how to set up this firebox to get more smoke flavor on a pellet grill. It's really easy to do and makes a big difference in the amount of smoke flavor you get. I like to place the smoke box on the left side of the grill so that the smoke travels over the food on its way towards the exhaust chimney. Just don't place it too close to the temperature probe, or else the heat from the charcoal can distort the PIT BOSS temperature readings. Once the smoker's up to 250 degrees, position the cold chuck roast on the top rack above the water pan. Place a temperature probe into the center of the meat and let the chuck roast start smoking. We're at about the 3-hour mark. Let's take a look at how the chuck roast is doing. As you can see, we're getting some nice fat rendering now. Some good juiciness there. Our crust is setting up pretty well too. I've got the probe in here. We're running at about 136 degrees internally. I'm gonna check a couple more spots here, because sometimes the probe can get lodged in a pocket of fat or something and not give you the exact real temperature, but that's pretty close, maybe a little higher than what the probe's reading. 142 there. Check over on this side. Yeah, about the same on that side. I did flip it one time, about an hour and a half in, just because as the fat renders and juices kind of fall with gravity, you don't want the top to dry out too much. So I flipped it, but I didn't rotate it because I want to keep this thicker side over to the left. I know a lot of the heat on my PIT BOSS comes from the left side, and so this side that's kind of tapered down, I didn't want that to get too overcooked by facing that to the left. So just kind of look at your chuck roast, how it's shaped, think about how your pellet grill cooks, and position it on the PIT BOSS accordingly. So we're going to flip this over again. You can see we're getting a nice bark on the outside there. We're going to let that keep going. I might add a little more seasoning to this side if some came off while it was cooking. But we're just going to let this keep going. Like I said, it's only at about 140 degrees. We want to let it come up to the stall, probably closer to 150, 160 before we wrap it. So just going to let it keep going here a little longer. chuck roast is getting closer to the stall. We're gonna put together a quick injection and get it on the smoker to warm up. So I've got some Wagyu beef tallow here. We're gonna add a little bit of that. Adding just a little bit of tallow to, especially to some select and choice cuts of beef, can add that extra richness to your meat. We're also gonna use some of this beef bone broth. I like this better than just regular beef stock. It's got collagen in it from the bones and just a deeper, more rich flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and open this up and add some of that. And then I wanna add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce too. The main ingredient in Worcestershire sauce is vinegar, and that's gonna give us a little bit of acidity. We've got a whole lot of fat and salt going on right now. We wanna kind of cut through those flavors a little bit with some acidity. All right, then we're gonna go ahead and get this on the smoker, and that tallow will melt, and then we'll whisk it up and we'll inject it in our chuck roast. So I'm just gonna put it over on this side here. We'll give it a few minutes to kind of get warm. Our chuck roast is up to about 155 degrees internally, and it's been sitting there for a little while. It's taken us 6 hours to get to this point, but just make sure you're always going by temperature and not by time, because this is a pretty thick chuck roast, and you may have a thinner one, or your Pit Boss may be running a little hotter. What's important is looking for how the bark is looking and making sure it's ready to get wrapped, okay? So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the bark on a chuck roast or a brisket or something is that the fat is really rendering. If I kind of give it a little push, you see that fat kind of come out there. It should feel kind of bouncy, but it shouldn't be, you know, it's not falling apart yet by any means, okay? There's still a lot of fat to render internally, but on the outside, we see a lot of fat rendering there. And the bark is a nice dark color, and when I run my finger across it, it doesn't come off or remove, okay? At this point, the seasoning and everything is kind of set into the meat. So we're gonna go ahead and get this off and get it wrapped. So our tallow's melted. We're gonna go ahead and whisk this up. We've literally got oil and vinegar in here with the Worcestershire, the bone broth, and the melted tallow now. So we wanna really whisk this up good, make a good emulsion here. Then we're gonna take our meat injector, toss some up and in there. And then I've got the chuck roast in a pan here so that the injection doesn't go everywhere. We wanna try to go with the grain of the meat as best we can. All right, so we're gonna go kind of down at varying depths and just add a little bit at each one, okay? Not gonna push the whole syringe full in there. We're gonna push down, inject a little bit, give it a second or two to kind of settle, and then pull the syringe out. I'm just kind of going from one end to the other with the grain of the meat, adding a little bit of tallow and stock as we go. Now, a lot of people wrap with aluminum foil, and there's nothing wrong with doing that at all, but you're gonna get more of a pot roasty type texture. I'm going for more of a brisket type texture today, so that's why I'm gonna wrap in butcher paper. Pink butcher paper specifically, and you wanna make sure you get the kind that has no additives, no wax. So I'll put a link to the kind I'm using down below if you wanna try it out. What you'll see a lot of people do as well is they'll just keep it in an aluminum pan like this and fill it with broth or jus or something. The reason I inject it is because I want that flavor to really be in the meat, at the same time trying to protect our bark. So by getting the jus and the flavor and everything that we would normally kind of braise the meat in an aluminum pan, especially if we were doing like a pot roast, by getting it into the meat, hopefully we're gonna protect the outside of our bark while still getting that flavor and moisture in there. So first we're gonna spray our butcher paper. You can use water. I'm using a little bit of apple cider vinegar today, but the reason you wanna spray the paper first is it'll help keep the meat from sticking to it when you wrap it. So now I'm gonna take my chuck roast and we're gonna put it at one end of the paper here. We're gonna take our butcher paper and fold it partially over the chuck roast, just like that. And then we're gonna roll it over once, pull it towards us. We're gonna tuck in these little ends here. And we're gonna fold this over on one side and fold this over on the other side. We're gonna roll it again. We're gonna put it back on the smoker. and I can feel my thicker end is still on this side, the tapered end is down here, so I'm still gonna keep that thicker end over here. I'm just gonna keep my water pan in place because it's gonna act as a heat buffer from the bottom to block that direct heat and let it keep cooking evenly. I'm gonna take my probe and put it back in, and then we're gonna let it run until it's time to take it off and rest it. So we let the chuck roast continue cooking on the Pit Boss till it got to 203 degrees. We used our probe thermometer to tell us when it was ready, and then we took it off and we have it here in our foil pan. So we're gonna let it rest, but I'm gonna rest it actually in my oven on the warm setting at 170 degrees. That'll help keep it nice and hot while it's resting, but let those juices kind of distribute and let the meat settle down a little bit and get nice and tender. We're gonna let it rest for about an hour or so before we unwrap it and slice it up. All right, this is rested for an hour in the oven. We're gonna go ahead and unwrap it. All right, we're gonna go ahead and slice into this. Make sure you've got a good meat slicing knife like this one we've got here. I'll put a link to this down in the description below. We're just gonna come right through the center here. Oh yeah, we got a nice smoke ring, really juicy. We're gonna try to go as thin as possible with our slices here. So like I said, we took our chuck roast up to about 203 degrees. It's kind of really right on the edge when you bring it up to about 203, 205 to where you can still slice it. It's not completely falling apart. If you want to be able to pull and shred the beef, I would recommend taking it up to about 210 degrees. At that point, it's really just going to completely fall apart. Now you can see on a chuck roast here, we get more veins of fat running in between the meat. This is really, you know, different than a brisket where you're gonna get nice, clean, intact slices. It's gonna be harder to get a fully intact slice here, but it's still gonna be delicious. And you can kind of just find the grain of the meat as best you can and slice against it so that when you have your slices here, you can see you've got the meat, you know, just kind of barely holding on and pulling apart. It's tender, it's easy to pull apart. It's not tough at all, but it's also not completely falling apart either. So let's go ahead and give one of these pieces a try here. I'm gonna take a little end, so get some extra seasoning. You can see that nice smoke ring we got on the outside there. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a little bite of this one. Oh yeah. It just melts in your mouth. That meat church seasoning is so good. Plenty of richness from the Wagyu that we injected, as well as just flavor all the way from top to bottom here. From doing that injection, you don't get any bland spots in the meat at all. Yeah, as soon as it hits your tongue, you taste the Worcestershire, the seasoning, the beefiness from the chuck roast, and really, really good. You can enjoy your chuck roast just sliced up like this, or if you want, you can put it on a sandwich. This also works great for heated up leftovers. I like to make my barbecue beef sandwiches on a good brioche bun with some sliced up pepperoncinis and just a tiny bit of Blues Hog Championship Blend barbecue sauce drizzled on top. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to get even more content from our channel. And you can check out the full step-by-step recipe that accompanies this video at madbackyard.com. I'll put a link to it, as well as links to all the products we used today and other videos I mentioned down in the description below. And thanks for watching.